Hari Ram Hari Ram Ram Hari 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 Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Ram Hari Ram Ram Hari 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 Krishna Hari Ram Ram Hari 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 Ram Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Ram Hari Ram 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 Hari 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 Krishna Hari Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Ram Hari Ram 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 Hari 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 Krishna Hari Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Ram Hari Ram 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 Hari 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 Krishna Hari Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Ram Hari Ram 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 Hari 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 Krishna Hari Yamuna Ram Ram Hari 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 Krishna Hari Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Ram 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 Hari 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 Ram Hari Ram 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 Hari 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 Ram Hari Ram 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 Hari 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 Krishna Hari Ram Ram Hari 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 Krishna Hari Krishna Krishna Hari 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 Ram Hari Ram 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 Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare. Okay, that's about it. Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna. No, it's fine. Thank you. Ram Ram Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Ram Hare 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 Krishna Hare. I've started using TikTok today, just like a 10-second little thing. Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna Hare Ram 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Okay. Hare Krishna devotees. Okay. See, now we don't want the sound. You got to tell him to come. Just 1 minute, we got to just sort out the sound from the Russian side. Adna Minuta. Yes, so Hare Krishna devotees, thank you for gathering, and we're going to have a special seminar from now. The intention is from now until April next year. We were going through Srimad Bhagavatam for the last few weeks, but starting in the beginning of April, we're going to have a really serious Srimad Bhagavatam course for Bhakti Vaibhava. So rather than go through part of it now and then in April just start again, we've decided to do something different from now until April or the end of March, April, like that. And that is, we're going to have a special seminar reading with commentary on Srila Prabhupada-lilamrita, Srila Prabhupada's authorized biography. And it's a wonderful thing. I'm sure many of you, maybe all of you, are familiar with Prabhupada-lilamrita. So that's what we'll do. We'll come closer to Srila Prabhupada and really develop a better understanding of Srila Prabhupada and a greater appreciation of Srila Prabhupada. This is the idea. By reading through the entire Lilamrita, or as far as we get at least, in the next, 7 months. And I think we'll get quite some distance. So we're starting at the beginning. And the volume is called, because it's divided into maybe 5 books. So the particular book we start with is book number 1, and that is A Lifetime in Preparation, India, 1896 to 1965. So, and part 1 is childhood. So I'll be reading, and here and there I'll make comments, just elaborating on some of the points. So it begins with just a little statement by Prabhupada about his father. We would be sleeping, and father would be doing arti. Ding, ding, ding. We would hear the bell and wake up and see him bowing down before Krishna. Actually, let me begin by chanting some prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nera Vishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakaptarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha, Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Okay, so the book begins. It was Janmastami, the annual celebration of the advent of Lord Krishna, some 5,000 years ago, years before. Residents of Calcutta, mostly Bengalis and other Indians, but also many Muslims and even some British, were observing the festive day, moving here and there through the city's streets to visit the temples of Lord Krishna. Devout Vaishnavas, fasting until midnight, chanted Hare Krishna and heard about the birth and activities of Lord Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam. They continued fasting, chanting, and worshipping throughout the night. That's one little thing I can just mention, is that on Janmastami, because Krishna appeared at midnight, so on Janmastami, we fast till midnight. And we stay up till midnight. This is what we do. Yes. And then at midnight we have midnight arti. And then after the arti at 12:30 or 1 o'clock, we have prasadam. And generally speaking, we have, for the devotees at least, practitioners, we have a Kadasi prasadam. For the public, of course, we're not so strict. And even it's not so serious that we have to only eat a Kadasi prasadam after the midnight arti. But that's the general practice. Yes. So, the next day, September the 1st, 1896, in a little house in the Tollygunge suburb of Calcutta, a male child was born. Since he was born on Nandotsava, the day Krishna's father, Nanda Maharaj, had observed a festival in honor of Krishna's birth, the boy's uncle called him Nandulal, but his father, Gaur Mohan Dey, and his mother Rajani, named him Abhay Charan, one who is fearless, having taken shelter at Lord Krishna's lotus feet. And just an interesting point is that just very recently, it means maybe a month ago, something like a month ago, ISKCON got ownership of that property in Tollygunge suburb, Calcutta. ISKCON got ownership of that property where Srila Prabhupada appeared. And there is a jackfruit tree, which is still there, and it was there 125 years ago when Prabhupada appeared. So that jackfruit tree under which Srila Prabhupada took birth or appeared, that is still there. And the property is there. And now it's ISKCON's property, and they're going to make nice temple and just really nice, suitable place with displays about Prabhupada, etc. Yes, so that's wonderful. In accordance with Bengali tradition, the mother had gone to the home of her parents for the delivery. And so it was that on the bank of the Adi Ganga, a few miles from his father's home, in a small 2-room mud-walled house with a tiled roof, underneath a jackfruit tree, Abhay Charan was born. A few days later, Abhay returned with his parents to their home at 151 Harrison Road. An astrologer did a horoscope for the child, and the family was made jubilant by the auspicious reading. The astrologer made a specific prediction. When this child reaches the age of 70, he will cross the ocean, become a great exponent of religion, and open 108 temples. Isn't that amazing? You know, that's an astrologer. Normally so many of the astrologers you get, they just, you know, they don't know what they're doing. And you just cannot trust what they say. You just cannot. But looks like this one got it right. I guess he was a bona fide astrologer. Abhay Charan Dey was born into an India dominated by Victorian imperialism. Victorian means Queen Victoria was ruling England. Yeah. Calcutta was the capital of India, the seat of the Viceroy, the Earl of Elgin and Kincardine, and the quote-unquote second city of the British Empire. First city was London, of course. Europeans and Indians lived separately, although in business and education they intermingled. Yeah, there was an apartheid system. British quarter and Indian quarter. The British lived mostly in central Calcutta amidst their own theatres, racetracks, cricket fields, and fine European buildings. The Indians lived more in North Calcutta. Here the men dressed in dhotis and the women in saris, and, while remaining loyal to the British Crown, followed their traditional religion and culture. Abhai's home at 151 Harrison Road was in the Indian section of North Calcutta. Abhai's father, Gaur Mohan Dey, was a cloth merchant of moderate income and belonged to the aristocratic Suvarna Vanik merchant community. He was related, however, to the wealthy Malik family, which for hundreds of years had traded in gold and salt with the British. Originally, the Maliks had been members of the Dey family, a gotra or lineage that traces back to the ancient sage Gautama. But during the Mughal period of pre-British India, a Muslim ruler had conferred the title Malik, or Lord, on a wealthy, influential branch of the Deys. Then, several generations later, a daughter of the Deys had married into the Malik family, and the two families had remained close ever since. An entire block of properties on either side of Harrison Road belonged to Lokanath Malik, and Gaur Mohan and his family lived in a few rooms of a 3-story building within the Malik properties. Across the street from the Dey's residence was a Radha Govinda temple, where for the past 150 years the Maliks had maintained worship of the deity of Radha and Krishna. Various shops on the Malik properties provided income for the deity and for the priests conducting the worship. Here's an interesting little thing. If you're familiar with Vrindavan, which I think quite a few of you will be, you will have been, if you've been to Vrindavan, you will have been to Loy Bazaar. And you would know, there's so many small shops there selling cloth and beads and deities and all sorts of things. You know who own, well, all those shops are being rented by the shopkeepers. They're renting those shops. You know who those shops belong to? They belong to Radha Govinda, the original deity of Radha Govinda, who's now in Jaipur. So every month they pay rent to Radha Govinda, all those shops in Loy Bazaar. Interesting. Okay. Every morning before breakfast, the Malak family members would visit the temple to see the deity of Radha Govinda. They would offer cooked rice, kachoris, and vegetables on a large platter, and would then distribute the prasadam to the deity's morning visitors from the neighborhood. Among the daily visitors was Abhay Charan, accompanying his mother, father, or servant. Srila Prabhupada said, I used to ride on the same perambulator with Siddheshwar Malak. Perambulator is a very fancy word. Are you familiar with that word? Okay. It's a very fancy word for pram. In fact, pram is a shortened form of perambulator. Yeah. So Prabhupada would ride in the same pram as this other child, Siddheshwar Malak. He used to call me Moti, Pearl, and his nickname was Subidhi. And the servant pushed us together. If one day this friend did not see me, he would become mad. He would not go in the perambulator without me. We would not separate even for a moment. As the servant pushed the baby carriage, perambulator, pram, into the wide expanse of Harrison Road, timing his crossing between the bicycles and horse-drawn hackneys. Well, you know what a hackney is? A hackney is a carriage, horse-drawn carriage which carries people, is a hackney. The two children in the pram gazed up at the fair sky and tall trees across the road. Sounds and sights of the hackneys, with their large wheels spinning over the road, caught the fascinated attention of the two children. The servant steered the carriage towards the arched gateway within the red sandstone wall bordering the Radha Govinda Mandir, and as Abhay and his friend rode underneath the ornate metal arch and into the courtyard, they saw high above them two stone lions, the heralds and protectors of the temple compound, their right paws extended. In the courtyard was a circular drive, and on the oval lawn were lampposts with gas lights, and a statue of a young woman in robes. Sharply chirping sparrows flitted in the shrubs and trees or hopped across the grass, pausing to peck the ground, while choruses of pigeons cooed, sometimes abruptly flapping their wings overhead, sailing off to another perch or descending to the courtyard. Voices chattered as Bengalis moved to and fro, dressed in simple cotton saris and white dhotis. Someone paused by the carriage to amuse the golden-skinned boys with their shining dark eyes, but mostly people were passing by quickly, going into the temple. The heavy double doors leading into the inner courtyard were open, and the servant eased the carriage wheels down a foot-deep step and proceeded through the foyer, then down another step and into the bright sunlight of the main courtyard. There they faced a stone statue of Garuda, perched on a 4-foot column. This carrier of Vishnu, Garuda, half man and half bird, kneeled on one knee, his hands folded prayerfully, his eagle's beak strong, and his wings poised behind him. The carriage moved ahead past two servants sweeping and washing the stone courtyard. It was just a few paces across the courtyard to the temple. The temple area itself, open like a pavilion, was a raised platform with a stone roof supported by stout pillars 15 feet tall. At the left end of the temple pavilion stood a crowd of worshippers, viewing the deities on the altar. The servant pushed the carriage closer, lifted the two boys out, and then, holding their hands, escorted them reverentially before the deities. Srila Prabhupada. I can remember standing at the doorway of Radha Govinda temple, saying prayers to Radha Govinda Murti. I would watch for hours together. The deity was so beautiful with his slanted eyes. Radha and Govinda, freshly bathed and dressed, now stood on their silver throne amidst vases of fragrant flowers. Govinda was about 18 inches high, and Radharani, standing to his left, was slightly smaller. Both were golden. Radha and Govinda both stood in the same gracefully curved dancing pose, right leg bent at the knee and right foot placed in front of the left. Radharani, dressed in a lustrous silk sari, held up her reddish right palm in benediction, and Krishna, in his silk jacket and dhoti, played on a golden flute. You probably know that when you see deities standing with particularly the right hand like this, that means blessing. Yeah, they're giving you blessing, some special mercy. At Govinda's lotus feet were green tulsi leaves with pulp of sandalwood. Hanging around their lordships' necks and reaching down almost to their lotus feet were several garlands of fragrant, night-blooming jasmines, delicate, trumpet-like blossoms, resting lightly on Radha and Govinda's divine forms. Their necklaces of gold, pearls, and diamonds shimmered. Radharani's bracelets were of gold, and both she and Krishna wore gold-embroidered silk chaddars about their shoulders. The flowers in their hands and hair were small and delicate, and the silver crowns on their heads were bedecked with jewels. Radha and Krishna were slightly smiling. Beautifully dressed, dancing on their silver throne underneath a silver canopy and surrounded by flowers, to a bai they appeared most attractive. I remember one time in Bhaktivedanta Manor, Srila Prabhupada was there, and one morning he was about to start Bhagavatam class. He had been there for the deity greeting, and so now he came back, got onto the Vyasasan, which was directly straight down the other end of the temple from the altar. So Prabhupada sat on the Vyasasan and sang Jai Radha Madhava, and then the Prema Dwani prayers, Jayam Vishnupad, Paramahamsa, etc. And then he's about to start, and he looked up and he looked at the deities. And we all in the temple room was just full, because Prabhupada was there, and the devotees would of course, not want to turn their backs to the deities. And obviously not to Prabhupada because he was giving class, but also not to the deities. So the devotees would sit on the right and left sides of the temple room. You know, a little passage down the middle, maybe just a meter wide, between those on the right side and those on the left side. And we would all sit facing into the center. So our sides were to Prabhupada, one side to Prabhupada, one side to the deities. So we're sitting there like that, but looking back at Prabhupada, who's about to begin the class, and Prabhupada's looking straight ahead at the deities, Radha Gokulananda down the other end of the temple room. And Prabhupada sat and he's watching for, not a long time, but several seconds or something. And we're all looking at Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada said, looking at Radha Gokulananda, Prabhupada said, Radha and Krishna are dancing very happily this morning. And we're all looking at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said that, and we all turned to see if Radha and Krishna are dancing very happily. But to us, they looked like they were just standing there, as usual. But Prabhupada was on the transcendental platform, so he understood. I mean, not just understood, he could see. Yeah. Okay, so life outside on Harrison Road and beyond was forgotten. In the courtyard, the birds went on chirping, and visitors came and went, but Abai stood silently, absorbed in seeing the beautiful forms of Krishna and Radharani, the Supreme Lord and his eternal consort. Then the kirtan began, devotees chanting and playing on drums and kartals. Abai and his friend kept watching as the pujaris offered incense, its curling smoke hanging in the air. Then a flaming lamp, a conch shell, a handkerchief, flowers, a whisk, and a peacock fan. Finally, the pujari blew the conch shell loudly, and the arti ceremony was over. When Abai was 1.5 years old, he fell ill with typhoid. The family physician, Dr. Bose, prescribed chicken broth. No, Gormohan protested. I cannot allow it. Gormohan, Prabhupada's father. The doctor, yes, otherwise he will die. But we are not meat eaters, Gormohan pleaded. We cannot prepare chicken in our kitchen. Don't mind, Dr. Bose said. I shall prepare it at my house and bring it in a jar, and you simply, Gormohan assented. Agreed. If it is necessary for my son to live. So the doctor came with his chicken broth and offered it to Abai, who immediately began to vomit. All right, the doctor admitted. Never mind, this is no good. Gormohan then threw the chicken broth away, and Abai gradually recovered from the typhoid without having to eat meat. On the roof of Abai's maternal grandmother's house was a little garden with flowers, greenery and trees. Along with the other grandchildren, 2-year-old Abai took pleasure in watering the plants with a sprinkling can. But his particular tendency was to sit alone amongst the plants. He would find a nice bush and make a sitting place. One day, when Abai was 3, he narrowly escaped a fatal burning. He was playing with matches in front of his house when he caught his cloth on fire. Suddenly a man appeared and put the fire out. Abai was saved, although he retained a small scar on his leg. Yeah, even when Prabhupada was with us in his old age, you could see small scar on one of his legs. In 1900, when Abai was 4, a vehement plague hit Calcutta, very strong plague. Dozens of people died every day, and thousands evacuated the city. When there seemed no way to check the plague, an old Babaji organized Hare Krishna Sankirtan all over Calcutta. Regardless of religion, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and Parsi all joined, and a large party of chanters traveled from street to street, door to door, chanting the names Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The group arrived at Gormohan's house at 151 Harrison Road, and Gormohan eagerly received them. Although Abai was a little child, his head reaching only up to the knees of the chanters, he also joined in the dancing. Shortly after this, the plague subsided. Gormohan was a pure Vaishnav, and he raised his son to be Krishna conscious. Since his own parents had also been Vaishnavs, Gormohan had never touched meat, fish, eggs, tea, or coffee. His complexion was fair, and his disposition reserved. At night, he would lock up his cloth shop, set a bowl of rice in the middle of the floor to satisfy the rats, so that they would not chew the cloth in their hunger, and return home. There he would read from Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the main scriptures of Bengali Vaishnavas, chant on his beads, and worship the deity of Lord Krishna. He was gentle and affectionate, and would never punish Abai. Even when obliged to correct him, Gormohan would first apologize. "You are my son, so now I must correct you. It is my duty." Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's father would chastise him, so don't mind. Srila Prabhupada: my father's income was no more than 250 rupees, but there was no question of need. In the mango season when we were children, we would run through the house playing, and we would grab mangoes as we were running through. And all through the day we would eat mangoes. We wouldn't have to think, can I have a mango? My father always provided food. Mangoes were 1 rupee a dozen. Life was simple, but there was always plenty. We were middle class, but receiving 4 or 5 guests daily. So this is Prabhupada continuing. My father gave 4 daughters in marriage, and there was no difficulty for him. Maybe it was not a very luxurious life, but there was no scarcity of food or shelter or cloth. Daily he purchased 2.5 kilograms of milk. He did not like to purchase retail, but would purchase a year's supply of coal by the cartload. We were happy, not that because we did not purchase a motor car, we were unhappy. My father used to say, God has 10 hands. If he wants to take away from you with 2 hands, how much can you protest? And when he wants to give to you with 10 hands, then with your 2 hands, how much can you take? My father would rise a little late, around 7 or 8 o'clock. Then after taking bath, he would go purchasing. Then from 10 o'clock to 1 in the afternoon, he was engaged in puja. Then he would take his lunch and go to business. And in the business shop, he would take a little rest for 1 hour. He would come home from business at 10 o'clock at night, and then again he would do puja. Actually, his real business was puja. For livelihood he did some business, but puja was his main business. We would be sleeping, and father would be doing arti. Ding, 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 we would hear the bell and wake up, and see him bowing down before Krishna. Gormohan wanted Vaishnav goals for his son. He wanted Abai to become a servant of Radharani, to become a preacher of the Bhagavatam, and to learn the devotional art of playing mridanga. He regularly received sadhus in his home, and he would always ask them, please bless my son, so that Srimati Radharani may be pleased with him and grant him her blessings. Enjoying each other's company, father and son used to walk as far as 10 miles, saving the 5 paisa tram fare. On the beach, they used to see a yogi who for years had sat in one spot without moving. One day the yogi's son was sitting there, and people had gathered around. The son was taking over his father's sitting place. Gormohan gave the yogis a donation and asked their blessings for his son. When Abai's mother said she wanted him to become a British lawyer when he grew up, which meant he would have to go to London to study, one of the Malik uncles thought it was a good idea, but Gormohan would not hear of it. If Abai went to England, he would be influenced by European dress and manners. He will learn drinking and women hunting. Gormohan objected, I do not want his money. From the beginning of Abai's life, Gormohan had introduced his plan. He had hired a professional mridanga player to teach Abai the standard rhythms for accompanying kirtan. Rajani had been skeptical. What is the purpose of teaching such a young child to play the mridanga? It's not important. But Gormohan had his dream of a son who would grow up singing bhajans, playing mridanga, and speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. When Abai sat to play the mridanga, even with his left and right arms extended as far as he could, his small hands would barely reach the drum heads at the opposite ends of the drum. With his right wrist, he would flick his hand just as his teacher instructed, and his fingers would make a high-pitched sound, teeny, teeny toe, and then he would strike the left drum head with his open left hand, boom, boom. With practice and age, he was gradually learning the basic rhythms, and Gormohan looked on with pleasure. Abai was an acknowledged pet child of both his parents. In addition to his childhood names, Moti, Nandulao, Nandu, and Kocha, his grandmother called him Kachori Mukhi because of his fondness for kachoris. Both his grandmother and mother would give him kachoris, which he kept in the many pockets of his little vest. He liked to watch the vendors cooking on the busy roadside and accept kachoris from them and from the neighbors until all the inside and outside pockets of his vest were filled. Sometimes when Abai demanded that his mother make him kachoris, she would refuse. Once she even sent him to bed. When Gormohan came back and asked, "Where's Abai?" Rajani explained how he had been too demanding and she had sent him to bed without kachoris. "No, we should make them for him," his father replied. And he woke Abai and personally cooked puris and kachoris for him. Gormohan was always lenient with Abai and careful to see that his son got whatever he wanted. When Gormohan returned home at night, it was his practice to take a little puffed rice, and Abai would also sometimes sit with his father eating puffed rice. Once, at a cost of 6 rupees, Gormohan bought Abai a pair of shoes imported from England, and each year through a friend who travelled back and forth from Kashmir, Gormohan would present his son a Kashmiri shawl with a fancy hand-sewn border. One day in the market, Abai saw a toy gun he wanted. His father said no, and Abai started to cry. All right, Gormohan said, and he bought the gun. Then Abai wanted another gun. "You already have one," his father said. "Why do you want another one?" "One for each hand," Abai cried, and he lay down in the street, kicking his feet. When Gormohan agreed to get the second gun, Abai was pacified. Abai's mother, Rajani, was 30 years old when he was born. Like her husband, she came from a long-established Gaudiya Vaishnava family. She was darker skinned than her husband, and whereas his disposition was cool, hers tended to be fiery. Abai saw his mother and father living together peacefully. No deep marital conflict or complicated dissatisfaction ever threatened home. Rajani was chaste and religious-minded, a model housewife in the traditional Vedic sense, dedicated to caring for her husband and children. Abai observed his mother's simple and touching attempts to ensure, by prayers, by vows, and even by rituals, that he continued to live. Whenever he was to go out, even to play, his mother, after dressing him, would put a drop of saliva on her finger and touch it to his forehead. Abai never knew the significance of this act, but because she was his mother, he stood submissively, quote unquote, like a dog with its master, while she did it. Like Gormohan, Rajani treated Abai as the pet child, but whereas her husband expressed his love through leniency and plans for his son's spiritual success, she expressed hers through attempts to safeguard Abai from all danger, disease, and death. She once offered blood from her breast to one of the demigods with the supplication that Abai be protected on all sides from danger. At Abai's birth, she had made a vow to eat with her left hand until the day her son would notice and ask her why she was eating with the wrong hand. One day, when little Abai actually asked, she immediately stopped. It had been just another prescription for his survival, for she thought that by the strength of her vow, he would continue to grow, at least until he asked her about the vow. Had he not asked, she would never again have eaten with her right hand, and according to her superstition, he would have gone on living, protected by her vow. For his protection, she also put an iron bangle around his leg. His playmates asked him what it was, and Abai self-consciously went to his mother and demanded, "Open this bangle." When she said, "I will do it later," he began to cry, "No, now." Once Abai swallowed a watermelon seed, and his friends told him it would grow in his stomach into a watermelon. He ran to his mother, who assured him he didn't have to worry. She would say a mantra to protect him. Srila Prabhupada. Mother Yashoda would chant mantras in the morning to protect Krishna from all dangers throughout the day. When Krishna killed some demon, she thought it was due to her chanting. My mother would do a similar thing with me. Okay, devotees, Hare Krishna. We will continue from here tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.